Hey, I'm strummerdood or mad or whatever, I don't know. So when I first played Dark Souls, I thought it was a pretty optimistic game. You know, people constantly delineate the hopelessness of existence, and the game's difficulty helps accentuate this philosophy. But in the end, you complete your pilgrimage. But then I watched True Detective, and then I read up on pessimism. And then I realized Dark Souls is the most nihilistic game of all time. The Souls games take place at the time of a kingdom's death. A period of prosperity called the Age of Fire enters its twilight with the fading of the first flame, a soul-granting flare of unknown origins. With the impending Age of Dark comes the curse of the undead, a state of consciousness after death. In both Dark Souls games, a lustful will to live accentuates the period during the fading flame. The birth of demons in Lordran can be blamed on the Witch of Izalith, who unsuccessfully attempted to curb the Age of Dark by duplicating the first flame. In Drangleic, King Vendrick seeks a cure for the undead curse, for which he has succumbed to. In an effort to assist his brother, Aldia tried to manufacture a firekeeper to coddle the dying flame, resulting in the Emerald Herald Shanalot.
I was born of dragons, contrived by men.
Aldia also spawned an ancient dragon, a race who at one point lived outside the Age of Fire and Dark. However, the entity failed to change anything.
That thing is a prop, a false deity.
Though he does offer an interesting perspective on how the kingdom came to fall. Even before the fading flame, the lords and humans of these kingdoms lusted over power. After attaining Lord Souls, Gwyn and his ilk annihilated the seemingly non-violent ancient dragons and built Lordran on their bones. Seath the Scaleless in particular betrayed his race over covetous purposes.
Oh, it's like that awful traitor long ago. He coveted what he did not have, and it drove him mad.
Humanity also showed their susceptibility to grandiosity. In a bid for supremacy, the ancient human city of Ulusiel fell victim to the seductive power of the Dark, allowing Manus and his abyss to devour and mutate its citizens. In a fit of paranoia, Drangleic's King Vendrick steals and attacks the giants after being persuaded by his queen, Nashandra. As we learn in the end, Nashandra planned all along to sit at the Throne of Want and usher in the Age of Dark. Also, it's called the Throne of Want, so, you know. Dark Souls' spiritual precursor, Demon Souls, more directly confronted mankind's greed. The power-hungry King Lamont XII channels souls through a forbidden ritual, bringing prosperity to his kingdom of Boletaria. But in doing so, he awakens the soul-devouring Old One who begins eradicating the race with demons. Human warriors then venture to Lamant's doomed kingdom, drawn to the alluring power of demon souls. Greed brings about the destruction of these kingdoms and subsequent undead curse, and in all three Souls games, the root of mankind's lust for power derives from their discovery of souls, bringing about a sense of self-awareness. That consciousness dooms the human race creates interesting parallels with HBO's True Detective. Its writer and showrunner, Nick Pizzolatto, took inspiration from American horror writer Thomas Ligotti in establishing the show's philosophical underpinnings. During the first episode, The Long Bright Dark, Detective Rustin Cole calls out human consciousness as the single greatest mistake in human evolution. And can the living undead of Dark Souls really argue this position? Before being imbued with the souls, humanity shambled along in the dark as unconscious hollows. Now they fear death and their own will to live.
Sometimes I feel obsessed with this insignificant thing called self. Even so, I am compelled to preserve it. Am I wrong to feel so? Surely you do the same in my shoes.
The unseen forces of the world around them seem to agree, as unexplainable curses abound in these kingdoms. Consciousness being a contradiction of nature comes up often in the works of pessimistic horror writers, and consequently, a common motif of True Detective concerns the natural world attempting to snuff out humanity. School closures, town evacuations, dilapidated buildings, ruined police files, all blamed on the frequent hurricanes and storms that ravage the Bayou State. The pinnacle of nature's takeover comes in the form of the antagonist's domain of Carcosa, a grassy entwined passage of human bones, mummified bodies, and toddler clothing. Carcosa came to be a prominent fixture of Gothic horror literature after being first introduced in the 1886 short story An Inhabitant of Carcosa. Its protagonist learns of his death after coming upon his own grave and a copse amongst the ruins of the ancient city Carcosa. Carcosa later re-emerged in Robert W. Chalmers' classic and influential book of horror stories, The King in Yellow. Hollow, where he describes it as a cursed city of lost souls. Further connections of Carcosa in the sense of True Detective abound in the Soul series. Again, as described more meticulously in Demon Souls, a deep fog literally cuts off kingdoms from the rest of the world, spawning demons within their walls, not unlike Stephen King's novel The Mist. Curiously, the Old One who manifests himself through the fog appears as an unformed mass of rock, branches, and leaves. The Dark Souls games take a more measured approach, simply separating levels with fog gates, but also illustrating nature's takeover with the decaying setting.
Everything's all run down and dying.
Even the seemingly untouched Anor Londo hides behind the facade of sunlight, disguising permanent darkness. In another sense, the inhabitants of these kingdoms deny the natural order of the world. In Dark Souls 1, Darkstalker Koth believes Gwyn and his ilk resisted fate itself by prolonging the Age of Fire instead of ushering in the Age of Dark.
Lord Gwyn resisted the course of nature by sacrificing himself to link the fire and commanding his children to shepherd the humans.
A similar exchange occurs with the Emerald Herald at the tail end of Dark Souls 2.
By ones who would cozen fate herself. They are the ones who created me. Fate would not be bested. And men were cursed once again.
The people of these kingdoms have an insatiable will to live, and fate seems to play a cruel joke on them with the curse of the undead. In a sense, conscious immortality. Those afflicted with the dark sign are destined to live through death until losing their sanity and becoming empty vessels operating off instinct.
We undead will never die. And that's quite a predicament, really.
Ironically, becoming hollow and losing all of their humanity brings the living closer to nature. I mean, they're simply reverting to the natural state we found them in during the intro of Dark Souls 1. Demon Souls King Lamont not only recognizes these aspects, but also craves retribution for humanity's unending lust for power. During the game's finale, we learn of Lamant's true motivation for awakening the Old One.
Surely you have seen for yourself pain, suffering that fills this world. But fight poison with poisons. God is merciful, and so created the Old One. The Old One will feed on our souls and put an end to our tragic realm of existence.
Channeling an Old One to annihilate humanity, as well as the very existence of Dark Souls 2's Great Old Ones, draws reference to H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos, and the Souls series as a whole alludes to his misanthropic horror tales. Just going off a list of Lovecraftian themes, we have the following. Analogous character designs, such as a squid-headed Tower of Latra prison guards, the gelatinous wannabe Lamont and Leechmonger, and the multi-eyed Manus. Temporary victories and the inability to escape from their plight, the literal fate of those stricken with the dark sign. Myriad of unanswered questions as illustrated by the ever-pondering item descriptions and the multitude of speculative YouTube lore channels, which are dope. Archaic vocabulary like Kazan, sinister direct relations such as this tool bag in the catacombs, isolated and detached individuals, a calling card for the series' tone, the insignificance of humanity which leads Boletaria and Ulysses down apocalyptic paths, and of course the mental fragility of its characters in the face of impossible truths, like how you'll eventually end up hollow by going insane thinking about going hollow. But perhaps the most interesting commonality with Lovecraftian literature involves dreams and dimensions. Cthulhu is a dead, dreaming god in an underwater corpse city, a similar role played by Demon Souls' Old One. Lovecraft created a dimension called the Dreamlands, entered either through sleep or physically. Visitors meet with gatekeepers who judge their worth, and the Dreamlands feature a pantheon of great ones who can be killed by humans. Dreams figure heavily into pessimistic writing. As an unnatural entity, Rustin theorizes he exists in someone's fading memory. Chemically imbalanced after years of undercover drug work, he experiences visions, seeing patterns and ghosts while he works. Of course, in the Souls universe, ghosts constantly walk around, the kindred souls of other worlds. Never really think about it, but your avatar exists as a spirit in someone else's reality. It's your bloodstain, your random meanderings. Those specters can even enter your world. Strangely, it's far more terrifying facing an aberrant, cognizant player than an innate, primitive hollow. Even stranger, many players take their lives instead of fight their fellow conscious undead. But even within your own personal world, you visit dreamscapes in odd dimensions, such as the painted world of Ariamis, where you jump down into oblivion to leave, the mysterious limbo of Things Betwixt, where you jump down into oblivion to enter, into the past Ulasil, where you effect change by rescuing Sif and battling Manus, and even into the dreams of long-dead giants, where you seemingly murder the Giant Lord during a raid on Drang Lake. All told, how can you even be sure you're not just someone's nightmare ready to be awoken?
Is this some sort of a dream?
What makes your avatar the so-called chosen undead when infinite other realities have their own chosen undead? I mean, where are these kingdoms anyway? Does the first flame's influence reach to other kingdoms? Could you leave for another kingdom at any moment? Or is this a separate dimension, a separate reality, maybe a purgatory? Who knows?
You will stand before its decrepit gate without really knowing why.
Discussions of being stuck in a dream coalesce into Rustin's and Friedrich Nietzsche's greatest nightmare. During the episode The Secret Fate of All Life, the psychopath Reggie Ledoux informs Rust that he has seen him in his dreams and that Rust is now in Carcosa. He then tells him that he will repeat these actions because time is a flat circle. Dark Souls 2's narrative focuses heavily on endless cycles, the implication being Drangleic stands on the ruins of Lordran.
Many kingdoms rose and fell on this tract of earth. Mine was by no means the first. Anything that has a beginning also has an end. No flame, however brilliant, does not one day splutter and fade. But then, from the ashes, the flame reignites and a new kingdom is born, sporting a new face.
We receive hints through the Lord Souls dropped by the game's 4 Great Ones, such as the Duke's Dear Freya dropping the old Pale Drake soul, and the Lost Sinner dropping the old Witch soul. Rekindling the first flame resets the world, only for everything to happen once again.
Once the fire is linked, souls will flourish anew, and all of this will play out again.
Demon Souls as well implies humanity will always awaken the old one through their greed, but the most masterful illustration of eternal return is found in Lordran. Everything in its design features cyclicality. Gameplay-wise, you're essentially playing Edge of Tomorrow. Live, die, repeat. The repetition aspect becomes a function of gameplay as you can retrieve lost experience after death, makes dying a fair bit less annoying. As you get more adept at running the levels, resisting the greed of another hit, advancing little by little, you come upon shortcuts to previous areas. Lordran slowly circles in on itself instead of jutting out in a horizontal, linear pattern, showing even the world design features cyclicality. Now consider Lordran's timeline, Age of Ancients, going into the Age of Fire, slowly headed for the Age of Dark. Whether the snuffing of the first flame leads to True Dark or another Grey Age of Ancients doesn't matter. As we see in the intro of the game, and later confirmed in Dark Souls 2, the Age of Dark or Ancients will inexplicably end with an unexplained fire. Thus, nothing you do really matters. All the lust for power, the insatiable will to live, the entrenched wars, the petty deception, the inbred fear, the never-ending death, and the incurable curse, in the end, it signifies nothing.
How queer you humans. How you go on, never separating truth from fiction.
And yet, despite these truths coming to light, hell, despite the intro of Dark Souls 2 telling the protagonist they're stuck in a fruitless cycle of death and empty fortunes, they continue on. So why even go on this pilgrimage? In another nod to Lagodi, we do it because of our programming.
Not much to go on, but I have a feeling that won't stop you.
No matter the bleakness of his world, Rust gets up and performs his duties to the best of his abilities. In the same way, the player pushes past Dark Souls' numerous challenges despite being told their effort will be all for naught. But come on, right? You completed your journey. Everyone told you the pilgrimage was hopeless, but as a human, you conquered Gwyn, Nashandra, and Lamont. It's optimistic, and now the future of the kingdom is in your hand. Even the small victory of choice matters somewhat, right? Except it's not your choice, is it? Throughout the game, you have two sides pulling you in either direction. Moral hypocrites like True Detective's Billy Lee Tuttle, appealing to your humanity to get what they desire. In Dark Souls 1, Kingseeker Frampt tells you of your destined glory if you kindle the first flame. He fails to mention the flare will incinerate you. On the other hand, Darkstalker Koth tells you to usher in the so-called Age of Man, but Koth has a history of misleading humans, as we saw with Ulasil. Also, there are way more man-eating serpents than men. In Dark Souls 2, Queen Nashandra, hoping to begin the Age of Dark, uses the player to open the Throne of Want, for which she can't do herself. Queens deceiving their kings becomes a motif when considering the DLC, and Shanalot reveals she brought you to the land in hopes of taking the place of Vendrick, who failed to sacrifice himself to the flame. It appears she has some ulterior motives as well. Regardless, either choice sees humanity following a predestined fate only to arrive under the thumb of greater beings, whether that be dragons, giants, lords, serpents, or unseen gods. Man will not only be second, but they will be the pawns for those higher entities. The philosophies in the Souls universe serve similar purposes as they do in True Detective. Rust's theorizing on nihilism helps highlight the atrocities done unto children, motivating him to help rid the world of these evils. From Software imbued their dark RPGs with strong pessimistic philosophies and references to show the bleak hopelessness of humanity's plight.
To be alive, to walk this earth. That's the real curse, right there.
Whenever a Prometheus comes along to give the Hollows fire, they use the flame to burn each other until all that's left is ash, only to start the cycle again. The same results playing out like a reoccurring nightmare. A nightmare where the protagonists can never cut their puppet strings.
Maybe we're all cursed. From the moment we're born.
The only satisfaction comes in fulfilling our biological need to level up and get to the credits. We control our avatar like a marionette for our dopamine hit, and when the developer tells us we have a choice and we believe them and think the game's optimistic, no, they're pulling our strings. You know what? This game is sick. It's a sick game.